What's going on, everybody? A bit of a rare upload, but today I will be showcasing my build for Koumei. She's been a super fun frame to explore and just try to optimize the past couple weeks, and I'm excited to share this endgame build with you guys. As always, timestamps will be included for your convenience. And if you like the build, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. That out of the way, let's get right into it. I do want to just first preface with this build is set up so that she can be as effective as possible with no decrees or with decrees. I don't want to build around getting certain decrees because that feels like you're relying on RNG, and I don't want to build without taking those into consideration because, again, that feels like you're just ignoring part of her kit. So we're going to make sure that we're making the best build possible for Koumei no matter what fate might have in store for you throughout a mission. With that said, you should definitely be considering weapons that are going to make it easier to get those challenges done so you can clear those decrees as fast as possible, as well as making sure that you're diversifying your elements. But just to put proof to the pudding about how Koumei plays without decrees, the gameplay that you're currently looking at technically has one, but it was the knockdown resistance decree. I accidentally got a 666 when I misclicked and cast it, so I do run Prime Sure-Footed on this build. It is the one decree that could have been completely useless, which is, I guess, good for the showcase here. But I thought it was worth showing you guys that she can function without decrees, but they are a source of her power. So the other gameplay in this, I am going to be using decrees, and I'm going to be showcasing the build with that. So immediately you're going to see that I chose to subsume on Breach Surge over Koumei's 1. While I actually love Koumei's 1, it's a super fun ability and I really like using it. I have another build for it that I mess around with on shorter missions. Honestly, it doesn't really work in tandem with her 4 that well. So I chose to subsume over the 1 just because the 4 gives a lot of CC as well as the spread of elements and stuff like that. It's really, really strong, and it's going to allow her to CC enemies, keep them nice and crowd controlled so that she can continue to function. And then Breach Surge, I chose that over some other options that I was messing with. Those things were like Pillage, Sickening Pulse, Wrathful Advance, even Sentient Wrath was kind of interesting. But all of them lacked the combination that Breach Surge gives of a defensive tool, keeps enemies blinded so they can't keep attacking you, allows her Amamori, her 3, to stay nice and topped off with the charms, at least a little bit, and it reduces the amount of incoming fire at any given time, but it also increases the damage that you're doing and the damage spread. We all know it's a fantastic ability. I like it on a lot of frames, but it really synergizes not only with Koumei's kit, her 4, but also synergizes with decrees. There's a ton of ways to increase your damage spread over an area, and Breach Surge is going to benefit from all of that. It's a really, really, really good ability on her. If you guys like something else, that's totally fine, but this is what I would recommend for keeping her nice and survivable, while also maximizing her damage in a mission. So subsume out of the way, let's get right into the build, and the first thing you're going to see is that I went with a triple Umbra build. It's worth mentioning you could actually do this with 2 Umbra formers instead of 3 if you so chose. I have 8 capacity extra if you wanted to run specifically this. Did a bunch of testing, lots of shifts and stuff like that, but this is what I settled on in the end. The triple Umbra is because she benefits from all 3 of these stats to a large degree. More armor is going to synergize with a bunch of the decrees. More health is going to help her with her health tanking that is even more enhanced with her 3. She's also going to get better damage reduction overall, which is great. It's going to synergize if you don't get the armor decrees, you'll still feel really tanky, but if you do get the armor decrees or the armor to ability strength decrees, you're going to feel really, really good. It gives you the best overall effectiveness in my opinion. And then the Umbral Intensify is also going to give you more strength, a ton of strength really, and that's going to benefit her 4, her 1, in this case Breach Surge, as well as her 3. It's going to improve that heal. It's a really, really good combination, and she benefits from all the stats. I understand the drive to push for Archon mods. It feels like it would make sense with her 4, but I really do think that's a trap, and I think that's just wanting to get the most out of those, but you really do get a lot out of these stats, and it makes her feel so, so, so good. The next thing I'll mention is the Mecha set. I do run a Mecha set here. You can see Mecha Empowered, Mecha Pulse. You'll get tons of armor. You'll get some AoE clears out of it. You'll also be able to capitalize on all of the statuses that her 4 brings, as well as all the statuses that get added to your weapons through decrees. It's really, really, really strong. It works really well, and it synergizes super well with the Predacite, and you also get the Predacite's build. I'll show you that in just a little bit. But you can also use Brief Respite and Rolling Guard in favor of these mecha mods if you don't want to run the mecha set. It's not as tanky. You will rely a little bit more on decrees, but it's still a really, really, really strong option. And Rolling Guard specifically allows you to preserve your Omamori, your 3 charms, just a little bit longer. It allows you to ignore status effects by just rolling out of them. It is really, really good if you want to run it. I just didn't really need it on the mecha set that I was running, so I chose not to run it here. And the mecha set made me feel a little bit lazier with my tankiness, so I felt like that was a really good option. The last 2 mods that I use for survivability are Adaptation and Prime Sure-Footed. Adaptation just gives you a little bit of a cushion when you're looking at survivability. There is a decree for every decree you have, gives you 3% damage reduction. It's really, really strong, and with that stacked with Adaptation, you'll feel pretty much unkillable on top of everything else. However, if you don't get that, Adaptation serves as a little bit of a cushion there. It's going to allow you to go pretty far without needing it, and you're going to feel really tanky with it. I actually don't have that decree in the gameplay that you're seeing right now. Really didn't get too much except for some extra armor on corrosive stacks for survivability in this gameplay. The other thing being Prime Sure-Footed. Prime Sure-Footed isn't needed, it's purely optional. I like it because, again, I like to play a little bit brainless, a little bit lazy, so I don't want to have to think about getting knocked down. If you don't have it, you could run Handspring to get recovery from those knockdowns easier. You could also run Speed Drift for cast speed. You could run Power Drift for a little bit more strength if you wanted to, and the knockdown resistance. Or you could run something for a little bit more range. You don't need any of those things. None of the other Exilists offered the same benefit that Prime Sure-Footed did, and that's why I chose it. The next 2 mods we'll talk about are going to be Prime Flow and Augur Reach. Prime Flow is just in there for the comfort of having a big energy pool to be able to pull from. I never really struggle for energy. You can see my energy bar is constantly full, so you probably could drop this, but I'd be really, really careful with that. I like the comfort of not having to worry about energy too much, so I'm always pretty overcautious with that. Really up to you in that case, though. And then Augur Reach, I really like this one here for a few reasons. One, because it gives you flexibility if you want to run something like Brief Respite and run the Rolling Guard build that I talked about before. Or it's only sacrificing 15% range, but you're getting a little bit of extra utility, especially if you have the Augur mods elsewhere. It's really, really strong, and it gives you a little bit more benefit than just Stretch itself, but you could very easily replace this with Stretch if you don't really care about the extra shields that you are getting. They aren't super meaningful or super impactful, it's really just an option. And then the final option here is Transient Fortitude. I chose this because duration is so meaningless on her, but if you do want duration for some reason, you could go with Blind Rage. I didn't like that. I felt as though the energy costs got a little too high if you didn't get the right decrees. However, I will say if you get any decrees for efficiency, she ends up with an abundance of energy in most missions. There's a bunch of decrees that help with your energy usage, so you really could go Blind Rage if you're willing to suffer through just in case you don't get those decrees. I don't like it. I'm building for comfort, I'm building for ease, I'm building to maximize regardless of decrees, so I chose Transient Fortitude because realistically, duration is kind of useless on her. You don't need it for really anything. If they're in your 4 for that long, they should be dead. If they're breach surged for that long, they should be dead. And finally on the build screen, you're going to see the Arcanes. Probably seen them already, but Energize and Blessing. Blessing, I think, is pretty mandatory here. You're health tanking and you want as much health as possible. It's a really good option. Also helps your Predacite with a little bit of extra health from Link Health. But then also you have Energize. Energize is great on her because it does answer that early energy problem that sometimes you might run into, maybe if you don't have decrees. I don't ever really have an issue, but it also means she's not beholden to any orbs or any type of equilibrium effect, although I do put that on my Archon Shards, which I'll show you in just a second. Overall, I think Energize is a really good option, but if you wanted to run something like Steadfast, it would provide pretty much the same effect. You just wouldn't have necessarily the full energy pool at all times, but you would have a bunch of free casting. Energize is going to give you a better option if you're looking to Shieldgate with the Brief Respite build instead. This is just what I preferred, but if you like something else there, it is a slightly optional. If you start to feel like your energy doesn't feel very good, then maybe go back to the Energize or Steadfast. Shards are pretty optional, so I'm going to keep this brief. I think casting speed is absolutely mandatory. That's the only one I would say is fully mandatory. From there, I do think at least a 40% equilibrium effect is really important on her. So I went with 2 Tau purples for a 60%. Makes it feel even better. Really like it. Synergizes with your deconstruct. Synergizes with the decree that increases health orb drops every 60% of enemies. Really, really good. And then 2 ability strength. Really optional here. You could run a lot of different things. Kind of personal preference. I like the ability strength because it's going to improve your 4, improve your 1, and improve the heal from her 3. All of that's really good. It does exactly what I want, so that's what I went with. And I did promise the Predacite build, so bear with me as we go through that. There are a few mandatory mods here. Mecha mods, obviously mandatory. Mecha Recharge, Mecha Overdrive. Synth Deconstruct is going to create a ton of health orbs. I think that's mandatory too. Link Vitality, Link Fiber is going to make the Predacite super tanky because you have a huge health pool, huge armor pool. Fetch, obviously a mandatory mod. From there, Hunter Recovery and Volatile Parasite synergized super well together, and it was keeping me really topped off without any effort. Really, really good option here. I think it works really well. Momentous Bond is going to get you your Predacite back quicker, as well as add a bunch of damage to it. Tandem Bond, going to add a bunch of damage to it, so it'll actually kill some of the things that it hits. And then Primed Animal Instinct, really just a convenience mod. You could drop that in favor of Contagion if you wanted to. I like it. It's super convenient. I think it's worth running. On the claws, again, this is the Pharaoh Predacite, but really run whatever you want here. I ran the Mecha mod, that's mandatory, and then I ran the Sepsis because I don't run Toxin on a lot of my weapons, so it gives me another way to kill enemies with Toxin that isn't just my 4 for whenever I need that for a challenge. If you're not looking to run the Mecha set and you want to run the Brief Respite Rolling Guard, quote-unquote shield gating type set, you don't have to run it, obviously. That's why I give you the option. But for that, you can run pretty much any pet that you want. I really like the Panzervulpaphyla. It's really strong. Another option there is going to be a Nautilus. The grouping effect is really, really good for when you are trying to use your 4 and Breach Surge. It'll propagate really cool. Does some cool things, some funky things, kind of like Mag with Breach Surge. It's pretty funny. The other options for weapons, I know a lot of people ask for recommendations there. You really can run just about any weapon that you want. For melees, anything influence is going to be really, really strong, especially since they changed the decrees to not combine with any free elements. So you can use pretty much any melee influence weapon that you want. I really like Blast Electric on a lot of those, but if you wanted to do something like Viral Electric, works really well too. Right now I'm using the Keratinos in the gameplay that you've seen here. They're really, really strong. They do fall off eventually over the Acolyte. Outside of that, some of my favorite for primaries are the Tenet Galaxian, the Kuva Comb, Latrim Prime Incarnan, the Cedo, the Kuva Sobek, the Corinth Prime, and maybe the Ambrax. It's actually what I'm using here. I found that it was a little weaker than I wanted it to be, but once you start stacking up decrees, it can be really, really strong on Koumei. For secondaries, Kuva Nucor, Ocucor, Pyrana Prime, Dual Toxicist Incarnan, Sicarus Prime Incarnan, Nell Prime, Atomos Incarnan, or Spore Lacer are all really good choices. Really run whatever you want on those. I have preferences, obviously, but anything that you feel comfortable getting headshots on, anything you feel comfortable using for challenges, whether that's Wall Latch, Airborne, headshots, elements, try to diversify your elements. And then the other recommendation is Shiver on your Arcane for the primary is going to be really good. Anything that ends in cold for your primary, anything that ends in heat for your secondary, and then anything that ends in electric influence for your melee will get you 3 of your elements, and then your pet can bring Toxin. It's a really, really good option too, if that's something you're looking to do. Overall, Koumei feels like a frame that is relatively misunderstood and got a bad rep early from the community. Not fully sure why, because she is incredibly consistent, ironically enough, and has some of the most scaling of any frame in the game when you factor in the decrees. I know some people like to say that you can't factor in decrees because you can't count on getting specific decrees. While that is true, you can count on getting some decrees, and at a certain point, because the pool isn't that large, eventually you will get something that is going to scale your power even further, and that will continue to happen the longer the mission goes on. It's really, really strong. She has tons of synergies in her kit and tons of ability to capitalize on that in longer missions. I really, really love playing. It's also worth mentioning that each decree does kind of function like a little ADD game. You get to have those challenges and pick up a new decree like a little reward, keeping you going in missions a little bit longer when normally you might have extracted a little bit sooner. It works for me anyway. I spent a ton of time tweaking and experimenting and trying different things in long missions, trying to make sure that I was giving you guys the best build that I could come up with for my playstyle. Now, maybe you guys won't like it. Maybe you guys want to make tweaks. It's totally fine. She has tons of flexibility. It's another thing I really love about Koumei, and I hope that after maybe trying this build, giving her another chance if you already made up your mind on her, that you come to love Koumei too. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing, amazing day.